Hey folks, Rob here bringing another video. This is going to be a Tactics 101 talking about some basics of ordnance and how to apply it in defense. So it's just going to be fairly short. We're going to talk some basics about how to use guns, and I'm going to give you some tips and tricks on how to use them for emplacement, hip, concealment, all that kind of stuff, as well as some tricks on where to sight them. So hopefully this proves useful to you, and let's get into it. First thing we're going to cover is emplacement, then we'll go into hip and concealment, guns as targets and how that works. Then we're going to discuss quickly gun shields and who gets them and who doesn't. And then we'll talk about some tips on where to sight them and how to place them and that kind of stuff. Now, we're going to be referring a lot to this gun destruction table, and it's going to give you some information on how to apply hits to the gun crew, who gets it, who doesn't get it, and all that. All right, so emplacement. Now, this is something that happens at the start of a scenario. You cannot gain emplacement in the course of a scenario. You must initiate this at the start. It can be a gun that has never moved. It cannot be hooked up to a vehicle, and it must be manned by a crew, not infantry. As squad types we're talking about here, it has to be a crew. Gun crew specifically. There are some ineligible locations. So here we're talking about paved roads and bridges, runways, obviously not on a rooftop, a bamboo for you PTO types. And if you want to receive the +2 emplacement TEM, which is what it offers, you cannot be the following: manned by a squad, and you cannot gain the benefits of any other positive TEM. As usual, you cannot double stack your positives. So if you want to claim wall advantage, so for example here we have an 88 long, it's sitting in a nicely walled hex. If you want to claim the +2 wall advantage for whatever reason, you would not be getting the +2 emplacement TM. So in this case it's moot. You're going to get +2 360, so it doesn't matter. But in some cases you may want to claim the positive TM, in other cases you may not. But you can have both. Now, it's going to be the target's choice of what you claim, and there may come a time in this case where you want wall advantage, especially if you want to deny it to your opponent, depending on what's going on in the case. Now, when it comes to guns as targets, there's actually 3 cases of how it can be fired on. So we have the area target type, in which case the +2 emplacement TM counts as a hit die roll modifier. And if you are in a pillbox or a cave, your gun target size does not count if you're in those 2. If you are not in a pillbox or a cave, then the gun target size will count as a hit die roll modifier. If you fire directly on the infantry target type, however, then you will get the emplacement TM and the gun target size. So some guns are large, like again, that 88 long is a large target, so you would get a -1. If you have something small, like a 20 long or something that has a white circle behind the manhandling number, then you would get a +1, etc. And finally, there's directly on the IFT. So here we're talking HE or HE equivalency, IFE, what have you, or machine gun fire, in which case you would only get the +2 emplacement TM. Now, there's some cases where you will lose your emplacement TM. So first of all, if you're a recoilless rifle, you cannot get emplacement by the nature of the weaponry. It's just not allowed. You cannot start the scenario hooked up, which we already said, and once lost, you cannot regain it. So should you ever hook up your gun, should you ever move it, should you or your crew ever die and you replace it with another squad or what have you, you'll lose that emplacement. And if your infantry, for whatever reason, voluntarily loses wall advantage or forfeits it, you'll lose your emplacement as well. Now, your modifiers for the +2 emplacement will be modified by airbursts, so you're going to lose -1 as per. And in sand, so if you're in desert terrain, your TM zone is going to be +1, not the +2. When it comes to hip and concealment, any emplaced non-vehicular gun and crew may set up hip and concealment terrain. So the question then becomes, what is concealment terrain? So if we look at our terrain chart here, anything that is in red is considered concealment terrain. So anything from brush to buildings to rubble, and now we have rail cars as well. It's not been updated on Neil's list here, but anything that is in red in your terrain chart constitutes concealment terrain, and therefore if you are emplaced in such terrain, assuming you're allowed to, you'll be able to set up HIP automatically, regardless of line of sight to the enemy. So even if you're not allowed to set up concealed normally, if you're a gun, then you will be allowed to. The exception, of course, is if for whatever reason you give your inherent crew non-inherent support weapons. If you give them an LMG and ATR, you will not be able to set up HIP for whatever reason. You can also set up HIP in non-concealment terrain, provided you do so out of LOS. However, the minute an enemy unit gains LOS, you have to put your gun on the board. However, it is concealed. So at least he won't know initially where it is, but once he gains eyes on that hex, then he'll be able to see where it comes. And of course, you have to look at your Chapter A divider. LOS range from nearest good order unbroken enemy. You'll see the different cases of what concealment gain and loss is for specifics. So we're going to cover a bit of that up next here. Now, if you're in a place or concealed gun, and this is very important, one I always forget. When you fire your gun, you have to carefully look, before you put your counter down, look at your dice and look at the colored die. If you rolled a 5 or a 6, your gun has been revealed. If you have rolled a 4 or less on your colored die, there's a chance your gun has not been revealed. So the case is that if and you have to look at the ranges that you're firing at. Again, look at your Chapter A loss and concealment gain loss chart. If your range is 0, if you fire IFE, if you're a recoilless rifle, then you've automatically lost your concealment. If you have rolled a 5 or a 6 on your colored die, you've lost your concealment. If there's an enemy unit within 16 hexes with eyes on you. If you've rolled a 6 on your colored die and the enemy unit is within 17 or more hexes, you've lost your concealment. But if you've rolled a 4 or less, you have not lost your concealment. You're no longer HIP, you're still on the board, but you still have retained concealment. And with luck, you've maintained rate of fire. So you can, as long as you roll a 4 or less, you can keep pumping down rounds provided you maintain a rate of fire without losing your concealment. Very powerful. When you have a high rate of fire like a 3 on a 45 double long like the Russians do in Stalingrad, you can go on quite a tear and never lose concealment, which is a very powerful tool, especially when you're setting up in certain locations. Obviously, depending on what's going on in front of you, if the enemy provides you a lot of targets, nice juicy hits, then you could go on quite a tear. You can also lose HIP if you are in a certain location that has been searched by the enemy. Now, the way searching works is you move into a hex, provided you have a movement point to expand, you roll a die, and that's how many hexes you cannot search. Now, if you search a hex and there's a HIP unit, you must be placed on the board. If you've changed your covered arc, like in one game I played with Dave, I was facing to the east, he was coming in from the north, and he turned his tank in a certain way and it was too much of a juicy target. So I was in a building and I pivoted my covered arc 1 hex. I unhipped, I pivoted my covered arc 1 hex, and I was able to roll, even though I paid +6 for the covered arc change because I was in a building, I rolled critical snake eyes, and I was able to take out his tank. So it was a very good shot. And it worked out obviously in my favor, but it was a very risky maneuver because I could have betrayed my gun and missed horribly, but it worked out in my favor. But because I changed my covered arc in the circumstances, it worked out. But because I changed my covered arc, I became unhip. Again, if your manning infantry also fires. So what we're talking about there is, let's bring up a scenario. All right, so in this example here, we have a HIP 75 long with a 2-2A crew, and they are HIP in this building location here, and we have a squad. And now there's vehicles that you can't see on top of the screen, and we're going to move the squad first. So we're going to come down here. Now, I want to wait for a vehicle because I have a 75 long. Why wouldn't I wait for that? However, this guy here is almost too juicy of a target. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fire my squad first. Now that's going to force me to unhip. I'm going to first fire my squad, which is going to be a 2 down 2 shot. All right, that's not too bad. A 4 on the 2 is going to be a 1 check. All right, so he passes. And now he can continue to move, or let's come this way here and we'll move into the woods. We'll put our 1 residual down. And now I'm first fired. So now if I bring in my British vehicle, let's bring in a Sherman. Good old Sherman. Sherman brings in here. Now I could still fire my gun, although it would have to be an intensive fired shot. All right, so I can still fire just because the crew fired inherently. Yes, I unhipped. Now the game's up. Everybody knows where my 75 is. I can still fire my gun. So that's just what that last note means. Just because you fire your inherent firepower does not mean you're no longer able to fire your gun. I just want to throw that in there as a quick note. Now, there's exceptions to when you lose concealment and when you don't. Reminder that when you fire special ammunition, you have a depletion number. Should you fail your ammo depletion number, you have not technically fired, in which case you do not lose hip. So again, just because you want to take a shot, don't be putting your counters down right away. Roll your dice, look at the results. A, for what your color die is. B, do you make your ammo depletion number? If you don't make your depletion number, then your counter doesn't go down. If you've rolled low enough on your colored die roll, your counter may be going down concealed, or it may not if you fail your depletion number anyways, right? So again, just because you want to take that shot, don't necessarily put your counter down. Have a look at the circumstances to see if it actually goes down. And secondly, if you're going to be firing at something besides a fighter bomber or a dive bomber, and there's no good enemy or no good order enemy ground unit with LOS to it, you're not going to be losing hip either. All right, so again, look at your Chapter A divider on hip, loss, and gain. Look at the cases. In this case, an emplaced gun, ACDG, LOS within 16, LOS within 17 or more, and nobody in LOS. Case F is only if it becomes broken, reduced, or wounded, fails a morale check, or successfully searched by an enemy, or is a dummy in a building. So none of those cases apply for an emplaced gun in none in LOS. All right, so again, anything that is not an LOS means you're not going to be losing hip status. So you're allowed to take as many shots as you want, and you're not going to lose concealment necessarily. Again, caveat emptor. All right, let's look at guns as targets now. Once you rolled a to hit die roll and you've secured a hit, again, you're rolling either area target type or infantry target type. You're not shooting at the gun per se, you're shooting at the infantry. Or if you're firing OBA or demo charge, throwing it, in which case you roll directly on the IFT. You roll on the IFT to see whether it's a near miss or a direct hit. If it's a KIA, it's a direct hit, in which case it is a gun destruction as well as it's manning infantry. If it's a K result, then the gun is malfunctioned and any manning infantry is casualty reduced, unless, of course, you fired AP. If you fired AP, the gun's destroyed and the infantry is fine. If it's a near miss, which is basically any other result like morale checks or pinning task checks, then you add in a gun shield modifier if it has one, which only applies to AT and infantry guns. We're going to get to that in a second. You add in the gun shield die roll modifier, and that may make it a miss, or it may reduce the effectiveness of the morale check. And of course, any unattended guns must still be checked for elimination. Again, you're firing as infantry, not at a gun. And any critical hit roll will automatically destroy the gun and any manning infantry. And again, you can see the summary of the gun destruction table. And this is all in Chapter C. Now, gun shields, as we said, are available only to AT and infantry guns. It only protects good order manning crews, not squads. So if your crew dies and you throw a squad in to man the gun, or a tank crew, for example, it's only the gun crew that will be protected by it, and it has to be through the gun's covered arc. So any fire group that includes units outside the covered arc will not benefit from it. Molotov cocktails will not help. The gun shield will not help against those attacks. Flamethrowers will not help, and indirect fire will reduce the effectiveness. Flamethrowers obviously will not be impacted by the gun shield, and of course any other positive TEMs. So once more, if you're in behind a wall, you can't claim the gun shield and the wall. It's going to be either or. Although there is another caveat there, you could use the TEM to help you with the to hit roll, and then use the gun shield to help you with the effects roll. That is allowed. And it's NA versus a direct hit. However, say you're emplaced, you could use the emplacement TEM to help you with the to hit roll, and then use your gun shield, provided it's not a direct hit, to help you with the effects IFT die roll. So that is allowed. You're allowed to benefit from that twice, but you cannot use an emplacement and a gun shield to affect the same. When we look at things like heat, high explosive anti-tank, it will destroy gun as per HE using the HE equivalency. You can see the table there, C8.31, where you look at the size and or type and the applicable firepower column. Flamethrowers and mauls will destroy it, again using random support weapon destruction, and that is basically using the firepower column. You use a single die, add in various modifiers, and if it's KIA, again it'll be destroyed. When it comes to AP and APCR and APDS and ATRs, again, you use HE equivalency. Any gun and manning infantry will be destroyed on a critical hit, and any K number or KIA result as well. And then finally, any MG or ATR, that's firing as small arms, and any ATR and MG fire group will also be using the random support weapon destruction as per A.974 to determine whether or not the gun is destroyed as well. All right, so where to sight guns? I like to put my mortars. The problem with mortars is a lot of the maps that we use in the game are restricted lines of sight. So that means you have to be elevated, right? Now, you can't put mortars up high, obviously, for obvious reasons, barring things like Stalingrad and roofless buildings. You're going to have a spotter up on a second level typically. That means your mortar is going to be on the ground, and that's how I like to set up. Now, you put your mortar behind on the outside on the ground, preferably emplaced in some kind of concealment terrain, and your spotter is hip or concealed up on a second level, and you pay the +2, but it's still your concealed spotter is blooping rounds for your mortar, and it's a very good spot for that kind of stuff. Also, upper level fortified building locations for small caliber, well, 76 millimeter or smaller. Artillery, infantry, and AT guns can be placed up there. Very good for shooting over low obstacles like walls and rubble. And when you're in really dense urban terrain, that's very handy. Again, Stalingrad is a prime example for that. And any gun, less mortars and recoilless rifles, because of the backblast, can be set up in ground level, especially in VC hexes. So, for example, over here, on the right, we have one victory condition hex. You can see I already fortified it. I got a 75 long set up in that location. So anything that comes close is going to be blasted with a 12 firepower attack, maybe even 24 if it's adjacent. It's really effective and helps defend victory condition hexes. It's always a good idea to defend your victory condition hexes that way. And putting in a gun in a fortified location is one of the better ways of doing that kind of thing. Also, you can put it in behind a wall or orchard. Again, in this case right here, we have the 88. It's surrounded on 6 sides by a wall. That is an orchard that it's sitting in, so it is concealment terrain. And you can set up hip, and then you just wait. Any one of these roads that the allies decide to come down is going to get blasted with an 88. He's going to have to change his covered arc, and he will become unhip. However, with an 88 long, it's going to be like a 23, I think, to kill. It will kill lots of tanks before, hopefully, he gets taken out. This is also an excellent spot because he is an AA gun. So should your opponent have some kind of air support, you set up your gun in anti-air roll, and it can start interdicting aircraft. And again, because depending where it's set up, provided nobody's in the line of sight of enemy, you will not lose your hip status, and you're knocking his planes out of the air. So that's another good spot to set it up. Again, we've already said victory condition hexes. It's all very nice and well. Good lines of fire for upper level building locations, and or again shooting down nice lines of road. Don't forget bore sighting, provided of course that the enemy starts off board, entering from off board, and it is not denied by an SSR. You get the -2 in your defensive fire. Very handy. You have to guess where the enemy is going to be entering, but if you guess correctly, a -2 goes a long way to denying something like a building +2 or +3, minus assault movement and all the other stuff. It's very handy to help deal with terrain effect modifiers. Again, you're guessing where he's going to be entering, but if you can tack on a -2 to all the other modifiers, it's very handy to deal with them. And if he moves in the stack and you're hip, you could really get you at the right moment. One point about guns in buildings, I draw your attention to this point here. You cannot move into and out of a building in the course of a scenario. Now, if you're playing one of the hassles, one of the historical modules, between scenarios as a refit phase, you are allowed to move certain guns in and out of various locations, depending obviously on the scenario and the historical module. There's a caveat there, of course, depending. But I believe most historical modules will let you move your pieces around as required. All right, then lastly, we're going to talk about Never Tell Me the Odds. Now, this is a big one. This is where you have to have a poker face. You have to avoid giving the game away because you have a hip gun and your opponent's not going to know where things are. Case in point, we have a scenario here. This is a scenario that Steve and I are going to be playing there probably next Saturday as it stands now. So you can see this is my British. They're going to be traveling in convoy and column. They're going to be coming down this road, and at some point I'm going to get whacked by a bunch of hip 4.47s and a 75 long. Now, you can see I put a hip gun here. Now, this is a building. It's a nice covered arc right down that road, which I have to travel down. The SSR says I must come down this road until I'm whacked. Steve must set up somewhere on this board and or in buildings on this board here. And he's all in hip. So there's, I think, 10 squads, 10 4.47s, and a 75 long somewhere on these two boards. I have no idea where he is. We're going to be playing on Vassal, obviously, so I'm not going to be able to get any kind of tell off him of where anything is. So I have absolutely no idea where his forces are. So I'm going to have to guess. Now, for me, there's only a couple places I think a gun could set up. One, this is okay, but it's kind of close to the action. This is quickly going to get overrun. This here is not too bad, but again, I'm going to quickly bypass that. Oh, by the way, the victory conditions are I have 3 Jeeps towing 3 guns. One of those 3 has to make it off the board. And I have to also get 1 squad off the board, I think it is too. Or 7 additional exit VP as well. So I've got 3 guns. He's got one anti-tank gun. 3 Jeeps. It's a Jeep. Super small target, but it's a Jeep. And he's got a 75. I mean, he just breathes on it, the thing's going to die. Any rate, so where is his gun hidden? These here are too close. This is a prime target for a likely gun position, and everything here is too dense. Street fighting potential, so I doubt it's going to get to that, but more than likely, this is probably where his gun is positioned because he's got, what, 5 hexes to blow me up. And it's far enough in depth that his units in front are going to be able to whittle away my infantry before I even get to that point. But my point is, when you're playing face to face, you want to avoid giving away the game. You're going to have to do mental math in your head. There's no way around it when you're playing an opponent. You're going to have to do some kind of mental math. You're going to have to calculate the numbers in your head when you are playing your opponent as he's moving his pieces. You're going to have to do it. Okay, it's a base 10, +2 for moving. I've seen him for 2 move. That means it's going to be at least another +2. 4, small target. I'm buttoned up. That's 5. From 10 is 5 to get. Okay, he said 2. Oh shit, now oh crap. Right? You're going to have to do this kind of mental math in your head. You can tell him to pause. But what you got to avoid doing is staring, okay, this is my gun here. That's his tank there. And you got to stop doing this with your eyes because he's going to be looking at you. And right away he's going to say, okay, that's where his gun is. Now he knows where your gun is and you haven't even rolled any dice yet. And now he's going to move everything away from your gun and avoiding your line of sight. All right, so poker face whenever possible. You're going to have to try and understand, at least at a minimum, I would say those first 2 columns. Try and grasp the 0 to 6 and 7 to 12. I wouldn't fire the 13 and on because the modifier is just going to get ridiculous, especially if you're in the red. If you're using red to hit numbers, so pre-44 Americans or Russians, they use in red to hit numbers. Anything in the 13th and higher hex range, you're probably just wasting time, unless you're firing area. You want to grasp the first 2 columns at a minimum and the modifiers that apply. You're looking at least a +3, probably a +5 on average of modifiers, which means you're looking at least a 4, maybe a 5 or a 6 to hit a moving target. And when you start factoring in the size of the vehicle, how long you've seen them, not even talking line of sight hindrances, you have to start doing some of this kind of stuff in your head really quickly. Yes, you can tell your opponent to wait while you do some calculations, but try and avoid giving away the game prematurely, because as long as your gun is hip and hidden, he doesn't know where it is, and it's a threat. As long as it's a threat, he has to act accordingly. The minute he knows where it is, he can maneuver around it, and then it's no longer a threat. And because it's no longer a threat, it's a wasted opportunity, and it may be out of position, especially if you placed it poorly, which unfortunately I do a lot. You don't have an opportunity to move it. And if it's in a building, you just lock down a piece and you cannot move it. Remember, you cannot move a ordnance piece out of a building once a scenario started. So you have to pick a good spot. You have to make sure it is a valid placement too, by the way. Remember, only certain guns can fit inside buildings. And especially when we're talking upper building locations, you must ensure that it's a proper caliber size and make sure that you follow the rules. All right, so that was a fairly, well, I guess it was a little bit longer than I wanted, look at ordnance and defense. Hopefully this proved of some use to you, especially you guys that may be new to using guns. Let me know if I've missed something, and if there's anything I should cover more in depth, I can do a Tactics 201, and then I can cover that there. And hopefully you guys will get back to me with some comments. Let me know what you think, and we'll see you guys next video. Bye-bye.